May 1940. The darkness descending over Europe grew deeper with each passing day. Nazi forces had torn France apart. Belgium had fallen to its knees, and hundreds of thousands of British soldiers found themselves trapped on a narrow strip of coastline, the beaches of Dunkirk. As the waves lapped against the sand, the drone of German Stuka dive bombers filled the sky like a harbinger of death. And it was in the midst of this chaos that a story unfolded, one that history forgot, but one that should never be forgotten. This is not the story of soldiers fighting hand-to-hand. This is the story of a radio team left behind the lines, whose names no one ever knew. They never fired a weapon. They never charged at the enemy with bayonets. But what they did may have saved the lives of thousands of soldiers. And the most heartbreaking part? No one ever came back for them. If you're new to this channel and want to discover the true stories hidden in the darkest corners of World War II, subscribe now and hit the bell icon, because what you're about to learn in this video will shake you to your core. The Dunkirk evacuation is remembered as a miracle in military history. In just 9 days, over 330,000 soldiers were transported to England using every vessel imaginable, from warships to small civilian boats. Fishermen, yacht owners, even captains of tiny motorboats joined this massive rescue operation. In the cold waters of the English Channel, under the shadow of German aircraft, an incredible display of solidarity took place. But behind this remarkable scene, there was a darkness no one saw. Because not everyone was rescued. Some were left behind. And among those left behind, perhaps the most tragic story belonged to radio operator Sergeant Ted Marsden and his team. Ted Marsden was an ordinary young Englishman who grew up in the working-class neighborhoods of Birmingham. His father had fought at the Somme during the First World War, and his mother worked in a textile factory. Ted excelled in math and science at school, but his family's financial situation wouldn't allow him to attend university. When he turned 18, he applied to the Army's technical units. Radio and communication systems fascinated him. Morse code was like a second language to him. Dots and dashes flowed beneath his fingers like notes in a melody. After completing his training with distinction, he was assigned to the communications unit of the British Expeditionary Force. He was quickly promoted to sergeant and given command of a 5-man radio team. His team was consisted of men just as skilled and loyal as he was. Corporal William "Billy" Crawford was from Manchester, cheerful, the kind of guy who could crack a joke in any situation. He was practically a wizard at fixing technical problems. Private James Thornton came from London's East End. He was quiet and reserved, but utterly dependable. He was the team's best cryptographer. Private Patrick O'Brien was of Irish descent, red-haired and fiery-tempered. He specialized in antennas and hardware. And finally, Private Georgie Evans was the youngest of the group, only 19 years old. He came from Cardiff and had volunteered as soon as the war began. He was like everyone's little brother. In May 1940, these 5 men found themselves in a small town near Dunkirk, operating a radio station set up in the basement of an abandoned farmhouse. Their mission was to maintain communications for the retreating British units, coordinate operations, and keep contact with the evacuation ships. It might sound simple, but this task was absolutely vital. Without radio contact, no one would know where each unit was, which beach they needed to reach, or when the next ship would arrive. Ted and his team were the invisible but indispensable cogs in this massive evacuation operation. As the last week of May arrived, the situation grew increasingly dire. German forces were tightening their encirclement from every direction, and air raids intensified. Every day, Ted received and transmitted dozens of messages, coordinates of retreating units, casualty counts, ammunition status, evacuation priorities. Each message was a matter of life and death. They barely slept at night. Billy constantly checked the equipment, James decoded encrypted messages, Patrick repaired the antennas, and Georgie tried to gather food and water. On May 26th, the first evacuation ships reached the Dunkirk shore. When Ted heard the news over the radio, he and his team shared a brief moment of joy. But that joy didn't last long. They hadn't received evacuation orders yet. Their mission was to maintain communications until the very end. Someone had to stay behind so that others could leave safely. and they were among those someones. As the days passed, the crowd on the beach began to thin. Every night, thousands of soldiers boarded boats and headed for England. But Ted and his team were still in that basement. On May 29th, a message came from headquarters. It was short and clear. Hold your position, maintain communications. You are critical for evacuation coordination. When Ted read the message to his team, everyone understood what it meant. They would be among the last to leave, or perhaps they wouldn't leave at all. On May 30th, the situation became even more complicated. German artillery had started shelling the center of Dunkirk. The explosions were so close that the basement walls shook. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling. Ted tried to appear calm, but the team's morale was rapidly declining. That night, James quietly approached him and whispered, "Sergeant, do you think they might have forgotten about us?" Ted couldn't answer, because he had started wondering the same thing. May 31st became a turning point for Ted Marsden and his team. That morning, contact with headquarters was suddenly lost. Ted spent hours switching frequencies, trying different channels, but he couldn't get a response from anywhere. The main communication line had either collapsed or headquarters had been evacuated. Both possibilities were terrifying. They no longer had anyone to receive orders from. They were completely on their own. Billy, assessing the situation, said, "Maybe we should head for the beach. Maybe there are still boats." But Ted objected. Their duty was to maintain communications. Perhaps other units still depended on them. Perhaps vital messages would come through. They couldn't abandon their post, at least not yet. This decision may have sealed all their fates. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A weak signal came through the radio. A French voice in broken English was calling for help. It was a French resistance cell providing critical intelligence about German movements. Ted noted the information and tried to relay it to England, but he couldn't establish a connection. The message hung suspended in the air. Still, this moment gave Ted an idea. If they couldn't communicate directly, they could at least keep records. They could write everything down. Perhaps one day someone would find these notes. From that night on, Ted began keeping a systematic journal. But this was no ordinary journal. In case the information fell into enemy hands, he used an encryption system he had developed himself. Variations on Morse code, numerical codes, anagrams, and references to inside jokes that only his team would understand. These encrypted notes would become one of history's most mysterious documents. On the morning of June 1st, Dunkirk had fallen nearly silent. The evacuation was largely complete. Only a few hundred soldiers remained on the beach, most of them wounded or exhausted. Ted and his team were still in the basement. Regular messages had stopped coming. Only occasionally, on distant frequencies, fragments of unintelligible signals. That morning, Patrick climbed onto the roof to survey the area. When he came back down, his face was deathly pale. The Germans were entering the town. There was no escape route left. Ted gathered his team and gave his final orders. All sensitive documents would be burned. Equipment would be rendered unusable. But the notes, the encrypted notes, would be hidden. Ted placed them in a tin box and concealed them behind one of the stone walls of the basement. If someday someone came here, if the war ended and someone dug through these ruins, perhaps they would find these notes. Perhaps their story would be told. What exactly happened in those final hours is not fully known. What's certain is that German units entered the town. Survivor testimonies confirm that sounds of combat were heard. The fate of Ted and his team remained a mystery for many years. In official records, all 5 were listed as missing in action. No bodies were found, no records of them appeared in prisoner of war camps. It was as if they had simply vanished. But their story doesn't end here, because years later that tin box was found. And the encrypted notes inside captivated historians. What was written in those notes? What was Ted Marsden trying to convey in his final messages? And most importantly, what really happened to Ted and his team? You'll find the answers to these questions in the continuation of this video. But first, if you found this content interesting and want to discover more unknown heroes of World War II, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. What stories would you like to hear? Now, let's begin unraveling the mystery of Ted's encrypted notes. Subscribe and let's continue.
Welcome back to Part 2. Years had passed since the end of the war. Europe was being rebuilt, wounds were being tended, and people wanted to look toward the future. But the past didn't want to be forgotten. The beaches of Dunkirk were now silent, those same shores where hundreds of thousands of soldiers had once fought for survival, had transformed into a peaceful coastline where tourists sunbathed. Bomb craters had been filled with soil, abandoned vehicles had been collected as scrap, and the traces of war had disappeared beneath nature's green blanket. But some traces weren't so easily erased. The year 1963 marked an unexpected turning point for the second act of Ted Marsden's story. That year, in a small French village near Dunkirk, an elderly farmer named Henri Dupin decided to demolish the old farmhouse his family had owned for generations and build a modern structure in its place. The house had suffered significant damage during the war and had never been fully repaired afterward. The walls were cracked, the ceiling was dangerously sagging, and the basement had been inaccessible for years. In his youth, Henri had found many wartime relics while playing near the house: rusty helmets, shell casings, torn uniforms. He had donated most of them to the local museum, but the basement had never been explored. When the demolition crew descended into the basement, they encountered an unexpected sight. Beneath years of dust sat old radio equipment, vacuum tube transmitters, wire antennas, headphones, and Morse keys. Everything was rusted and decayed, but it was still recognizable for what it was. This was clearly a military communication station. The crew reported the discovery to local authorities, and French military historians soon arrived at the site. What they actually found was far more valuable than the equipment. In the southeast corner of the basement, hidden behind one of the stone walls, was a small cavity. Inside this cavity was a tin box, rusted but still intact. Faded letters painted on the box were still legible: REMS, Royal Engineers Message Station. When the box was carefully opened, a series of yellowed but readable papers emerged. These papers consisted of dozens of pages of handwritten notes. However, there was a problem. The notes were entirely encrypted. Not a single word, not a single sentence could be understood by an ordinary eye. When French authorities realized the notes belonged to British military personnel, they handed the documents over to the Imperial War Museum in London. When the museum's archival experts began examining the notes, they realized this was no ordinary military journal. The encryption system was unusually complex and personal. It bore no resemblance to standard military codes. Who had written these notes? Why had they used such encryption? And most importantly, what did the notes say? The first clue came from a small identification card that fell from between the pages. On the card, faded but legible, was a name: Sergeant Edward T. Marsden, Royal Corps of Signals. Now they had a name. Researchers began searching military records and found Ted Marsden's file. The file stated that he had commanded a 5-man radio team, served in a communications role during the Dunkirk evacuation, and was marked as missing in action in June 1940. His body had never been found. There was no record of him in prisoner of war camps. His official status remained missing in action. Now, let's pause at this point and examine the process of decoding the encrypted notes in detail, because this process is a fascinating story in itself and reveals Ted Marsden's intelligence. The task of decoding the notes was assigned to British military historian and cryptographer Dr. Margaret Ashworth. Dr. Ashworth was an experienced expert who had researched the history of Bletchley Park and studied the process of breaking the Enigma machine. However, Ted's notes hadn't been encrypted by any machine. This was an entirely handcrafted, personal coding system, and this made it both easier and harder to crack. Machine ciphers have specific mathematical patterns, but personal codes depend entirely on their creator's mind. Dr. Ashworth first searched for patterns in the notes. Certain symbols appeared frequently. Some number sequences emerged at regular intervals. And interestingly, small drawings had been made in the margins of the notes, shapes like a bird, a football, a beer glass, and map symbols. Were these random doodles, or were they part of the cipher?
The answer was hidden deep within Ted's military file. The file noted that Ted was a passionate supporter of Birmingham City Football Club, that he practiced bird watching as a hobby, and that he enjoyed drawing maps in his spare time. Bingo! Dr. Ashworth realized that the drawings were actually subject headings. Sections with bird drawings contained surveillance and reconnaissance information. Sections with footballs described the team's morale. Sections with beer glasses contained supply and logistics information. Map symbols indicated German movements. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe. But the actual cipher still hadn't been cracked. The texts consisted of meaningless strings of letters and numbers. Dr. Ashworth worked for months. She performed frequency analysis, tried possible keywords, and tested Morse alphabet variations. Finally, help came from an unexpected source. A distant cousin of Ted's, living in Birmingham, Andrew Marsden, contacted the museum. Andrew explained that he had corresponded with his Uncle Ted as a child, and that Ted had taught him simple cipher games. One of these games was called Birmingham Blues, and it created an alphabet using the city's street names. This information was worth its weight in gold for Dr. Ashworth. She researched Birmingham's street names and finally cracked Ted's encryption system. Ted had matched each letter with a Birmingham street name. The letter A was Aston Road, B was Broad Street, C was Corporation Street, and so on. Numbers were coded using a reverse Morse alphabet system. Normally in Morse, a dot is short and a dash is long, but Ted had reversed this. This simple but effective system made it impossible for the enemy to understand the contents even if they captured the notes. When the cipher was cracked, the content that emerged deeply moved historians. Ted Marsden had kept detailed notes every day from May 27th to June 2nd. These notes revealed a side of the Dunkirk evacuation that official histories never told. In the first note, dated May 27th, Ted had written, "Received a message from headquarters at 6 a.m. today. Evacuation has begun. They're going to try to rescue over 300,000 men. Our mission is to maintain communications until the very end. When they'll come for us? I don't know. Maybe tomorrow, maybe a week from now, maybe never. Billy is cracking jokes, but his eyes aren't smiling. James is triple-checking the ciphers, a sign he's nervous. Patrick keeps checking the antennas just to stay busy. Georgie cried last night, but everyone pretended not to hear. As for me, I'm trying to appear strong. That's what a commander should do, isn't it?" The notes from May 28th were more technical in nature. Ted had recorded the messages he received and transmitted throughout the day. One message was particularly noteworthy. A battalion of the 3rd Infantry Division was directed to the wrong coordinates. We sent a correction message. If it weren't for us, 600 men would have marched straight into German lines. Maybe I can sleep a little easier tonight. I guess we're useful after all. This note clearly demonstrated the importance of Ted and his team. They were the silent heroes of the evacuation. They were invisible, but they were saving lives. A wrong coordinate, a wrong direction, could mean the deaths of hundreds of soldiers, and Ted's team was correcting these errors. The note from May 29th carried a more personal tone. Today was Patrick's birthday. He turned 22. We had nothing to celebrate with. We just shared our last tin of baked beans, and Georgie sang happy birthday in an off-key voice. Patrick laughed, really laughed. Maybe it was the last time we shared such a genuine moment. The sound of explosions outside never stops. The Germans are getting a little closer every day. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. The note dated May 30th reflected the seriousness of the situation. Contact with headquarters is weakening. We can only make contact 3 times a day. Messages are delayed. I still haven't received confirmation for the intelligence report I sent yesterday. Either our message didn't get through, or no one cares about us anymore. Billy checked the equipment, no problem on our end. The problem is there, in London, or at headquarters. Maybe they've been evacuated too. Maybe no one is listening to us anymore. May 31st was a breaking point in Ted's notes. Connection completely lost. I've been trying every frequency for 8 hours, no response. Either the entire system has collapsed or we're the only ones left behind. James looked at me and said nothing. There was nothing to say anyway. We thought about going to the beach, but we still have our duty. Maybe other units depend on us. Maybe a message will come. It would be easy to abandon post, but we're soldiers. British soldiers. We do what's right, not what's easy. These lines perfectly summarize Ted's character. Sense of duty, loyalty to his team, and commitment to British military tradition. Even in the most difficult moment, he didn't think of abandoning his post.
The notes from June 1st were even more dramatic. Something strange happens tonight. We received a call in French over the radio. It came from a resistance cell. They gave us the coordinates of the German 10th Panzer Division. 20 tanks, 50 trucks, an estimated 2,000 soldiers. They were advancing northeast, probably to completely encircle Dunkirk. This information was vital. I immediately tried to relay it to London, but there was no connection. I recorded the message. Maybe it will be useful someday. This note shows that Ted wasn't just a radio operator. He was also an intelligence gatherer. He was receiving information from the French resistance movement and recording it. This information was invaluable for post-war historians. The final note, dated June 2nd, was the most emotional one. Dr. Ashworth admitted that her eyes welled up while reading this note. Today might be our last day. The Germans have entered the town. Patrick saw them from the roof. They're patrolling a few hundred meters away. There's no escape route left. We destroyed the equipment, burned the sensitive documents. But I'm hiding these notes. Maybe someday someone will find them. Maybe their story will be told. I looked at my team and felt proud. Billy is still trying to crack jokes. What a brave man. James is checking the last cipher, meticulous as always. Patrick is removing the last piece of the antenna. He never gives up. And Georgie, poor little Georgie, 19 years old. He wrote a letter to his mother and put it in his pocket. I hope it reaches her someday. I don't know what we accomplished in this war. Maybe nothing, maybe a lot. But I know this. We did our duty. We did it until the very end. We died as British soldiers if we were going to die. Dear person who finds these notes, whoever you are, please notify our families. The Marsden family in Birmingham, the Crawford family in Manchester, the Thornton family in London, the O'Brien family in Dublin, and the Evans family in Cardiff. Tell them their sons fought heroically. Tell them we weren't afraid. And if you're British or from an allied nation, know this. We were here for you. We were here for your freedom. Please don't forget us. Sergeant Edward Ted Marsden, Royal Corps of Signals, June 2nd, 1940. When this final note was read, historians and military officials observed a moment of deep respect. Ted Marsden and his team, though their names had never been written into history, were true heroes, invisible heroes, silent, selfless men. So what happened after the notes were found? The Imperial War Museum published the complete translation of the notes and shared them with the public. The families in Birmingham, Manchester, London, Dublin, and Cardiff were contacted. Ted's family finally learned the story of their relative after decades. A campaign was launched to erect a memorial at Dunkirk. And most importantly, Ted Marsden and his team were officially awarded the Honor Medal. 23 years after their deaths, they finally received the recognition they deserved, albeit late. But the story doesn't end here, because the notes contained another secret. On the back of the last page was an encrypted map in Ted's handwriting. This map indicated another hidden location near the basement, and this location had never been excavated.
When Dr. Ashworth saw this map, she excitedly shared it with the research team. The symbols on the map used a different version of Ted's Birmingham Street cipher. When decoded, it pointed to an old well 100 meters east of the farmhouse. What was in this well? What had Ted hidden there? And why had he kept this information in a separate cipher? We'll discover the answers to these questions together in the third and final part. But for now, I can tell you this. This story contains a much deeper and much more surprising ending than you might think. Ted Marsden's final secret led to one of history's most unexpected discoveries. If you've watched this far, thank you in advance. If you want content like this to continue, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments, what do you think Ted's final secret might be? I'm eagerly awaiting your guesses. Now, before we move on to the final part, let's take a brief breath, because what you're about to learn will deeply affect you.
We're in the final part, and now we come to the most striking chapter of this story. The mysterious map discovered on the last page of Ted Marsden's encrypted notes led historians and researchers on an entirely new adventure. This map was more than a simple drawing. Ted had hidden something before his death, and it would take decades for this secret to be revealed. Are you ready? Because what you're about to learn will add a whole new dimension to this story. When Dr. Margaret Ashworth decoded the map, she couldn't believe her eyes at first. The location Ted had marked was an old well 100 meters east of the farmhouse. This well had filled with rubble after the war and been covered over with soil. The local population had forgotten there was even a well there, but Ted's map gave the exact coordinates of the well, and furthermore implied that something was inside it. A small note had been written in the margin of the map, also encrypted. For the future. For the truth. So it won't be forgotten. In 1965, a joint British and French archaeological team launched a comprehensive excavation in the Dunkirk region. The main purpose of this effort was to find military equipment and documents lost during the war. Ted's map became one of the excavation's primary targets. The team surveyed the area with modern detectors and radar scanning equipment. And at the spot the map indicated, an old well structure was indeed detected underground. The excavation work lasted 3 weeks. The well was approximately 12 meters deep, and most of it was filled with rubble and soil. The team cleared the well centimeter by centimeter. At the 7th meter, the first finds emerged: a rusty British military helmet, a water canteen, and a decayed leather bag. Inside the bag were several documents damaged by moisture, but still readable. These documents were official communication records of the British Expeditionary Force. Ted had hidden them in the well to keep them from falling into enemy hands. But the real discovery awaited at the bottom of the well. At the 11th meter, the excavation team encountered a metal box. This box resembled the tin box where Ted had stored his notes, but it was much larger. When the box was carefully extracted, the writing on it surprised everyone. Final messages, Royal Corps of Signals, Dunkirk Station. Inside the box were 3 different categories of documents. The first was the continuation of Ted's personal journal. The notes found in the basement ended on June 1st, but this journal also covered June 2nd and June 3rd. The second category consisted of letters written by the team members to their families. 5 letters, 5 different handwritings, 5 separate farewells. The third was the most surprising: detailed maps of German military movements and intelligence reports received from the French resistance. Let's first look at Ted's additional journal notes. The note dated June 2nd was the continuation of the final note from the basement. It's past midnight. The Germans are still in town, but they haven't searched our building yet. We made a plan. At dawn, just before darkness falls, we'll go to the well. We'll hide all the important documents there. If we're captured, at least the information will be safe. If we can escape, we'll come back for them. Either way, we'll have completed our mission. This note shows that Ted was thinking strategically even in his final hours. He wasn't just a soldier trying to survive. He was a commander who understood the importance of his mission and thought about the future. Preventing the documents from falling into enemy hands was as important to him as his own life. The final note, dated June 3rd, was heartbreaking. Dawn is breaking. We went to the well, hid the documents. On the way back, we encountered a German patrol. Billy was shot in the left shoulder. We carried him back to the basement.
The wound is serious, but not fatal. At least not for now. But we can't escape anymore. It's impossible to reach the beach while carrying Billy. James suggested an idea. Maybe we should surrender, he said. We'll survive as prisoners of war, and when the war ends, we'll go home. It's a logical idea. But Patrick objected. With his Irish pride, he said, "I will never surrender." Georgie said nothing. He just held the letter he'd written to his mother in his hand. "I don't know what decision to make. As commander, I should be the one to decide, but how can I? How can I choose between death and captivity? How can I be responsible for the fate of 4 men?" The note cuts off here. Whatever Ted wrote after these lines, the rest of the paper had become illegible due to moisture. But the clues history has provided tell us the continuation of the story. Now, let's turn to the team members' letters. These letters revealed the most human face of war. What did 5 young men want to say to their loved ones when they came face to face with death?
Billy Crawford's letter was written to his mother in Manchester. "Dear Mum, when you read this letter, I probably won't be with you anymore. But don't be sad, okay? I'm not sad. I did the right things in my life. I fought for my country. I fought for my friends. I'm proud to be your son. You were the best mum, always making me laugh, always supporting me. I promise you, wherever I go, I'll be cracking jokes there too, because you taught me that laughter is the strongest weapon. I love you, Mum. I always will. Your son, Billy." James Thornton's letter was written to his sister in London. "Dear Mary, your little brother is writing to you one last time. I know we always used to fight. I'd mess with your things, you'd hide my books. But know this, I always loved you. You were the best sister. Tell Mom and Dad I didn't let them down. I did my duty. And if you have children someday, tell them about their uncle. The uncle who loved ciphers, quiet but loyal. Take care of yourself, Mary. I'm praying for you. Your brother, James." Patrick O'Brien's letter was written to his father in Dublin. "Dear Dad, fighting in the British Army as an Irishman might seem strange to you. I know you always fought for independence. But understand this, Dad, this war is different. This war is the war of all free people. If the Nazis win, neither Ireland nor England will remain. We'll all be slaves. I fought for freedom, Dad, just like you taught me. And if I'm going to die, I'm dying on my feet, like an O'Brien. I love you, Dad. Tell Mum too. I missed her so much. Your son, Patrick." Georgie Evans' letter was the shortest but most heartbreaking. He'd written to his mother in Cardiff. "Dear Mum, I'm scared. I wish I had been brave enough to tell you this face to face, but I couldn't, so I'm writing it now. I'm scared, but I'm not running. Sergeant Ted trusts us. My friends trust me. I can't abandon them halfway. Mum, if I die, forgive me. I should have given you more time. I should have hugged you more. But know this, my last thought will be of you. I love you. Your son, Georgie." And finally, Ted Marsden's letter. He had written to his family in Birmingham. "Dear mother, father, and siblings, writing this letter is the hardest thing in my life, but I must write it because it may be my last chance. First, know this, I have no regrets. I chose this path myself. I wanted to serve my country, to fight for freedom, and I did. Father, you fought at the Somme. Now I understand what you felt. That fear, that uncertainty, that responsibility, but also that pride. I'm grateful to be your son. You taught me how to be brave. Mother, your smile is always in my mind. In every difficult moment, I closed my eyes and thought of you. I stayed strong for you. I kept standing for you. If I ever go to heaven, you'll be the first person I look for. My siblings, my request to you is this. Look after each other. Don't let the family fall apart. And remember me, not with sadness, but with pride. I did my duty. Now it's your turn. Live, love, be happy. Live my share too." Finally, I must say something to my team. Billy, James, Patrick, Georgie, meeting you was the greatest honor of my life. I couldn't have imagined a better team, better friends, better brothers. Wherever we go together. With love and gratitude, Sergeant Edward Ted Marsden. When these letters were found in 1965, they were delivered to the surviving family members. Billy's mother had passed away, but his sister received the letter and read it through tears. James's sister Mary, when she received the letter at 70 years old, felt as though she had seen her brother one last time. Patrick's father had long since passed away, but his nieces and nephews carried on the Irish legacy of heroism with the letter. Georgie's mother, at 90 years old, experienced the most emotional moment of her life reading her son's last words. And Ted's family held a small ceremony in Birmingham and buried the letter in the family plot. Now we come to the most mysterious part of the story. The third category of documents recovered from the well were German military maps and French resistance intelligence. These documents proved just how critical a mission Ted and his team had undertaken. The maps showed the exact positions, advance routes, and logistics lines of the German 10th Panzer Division. The reports from the French resistance analyzed the weak points of the Nazi occupation forces. If this information had reached England during the war, perhaps post-Dunkirk strategies could have been changed. Perhaps more soldiers could have been saved. Perhaps the course of the war would have changed. Of course, there are no what-ifs in history. But this discovery revealed the potential importance of Ted Marsden and his team. So, what ultimately happened to Ted and his team? For years, this question remained unanswered. They were marked as missing in action in official records. No bodies were found, no prisoner records existed. But in 1990, following the fall of the Berlin Wall, the opening of East German archives finally answered this question. In the archives, reports from the German 21st Infantry Division, which had operated in the Dunkirk region, were found. A report dated June 3, 1940, stated, "At the Petit Fatum location near Dunkirk, 5 British soldiers were detected in the basement of an abandoned farmhouse. A call was made for their surrender. One of the soldiers was wounded. The other 4 were unarmed but refused to surrender. A firefight ensued. 5 enemy soldiers were neutralized." Neutralized. This cold military term described the end of 5 young men's lives. Ted, Billy, James, Patrick, and Georgie had chosen to fight rather than surrender. Unarmed, wounded, hopeless, but never bowing down. The continuation of the report inadvertently confirmed their heroism. The enemy soldiers displayed extraordinary resistance. According to our intelligence, they operated a radio station until the very end. All documents and equipment were found destroyed. The Germans never found the secret documents in the well. Ted's final plan had worked. He and his team died, but the information survived. 25 years later, when this information came to light, it immortalized their legacy. In 1995, on the 55th anniversary of the Dunkirk evacuation, the British government held an official ceremony. With the approval of Queen Elizabeth II, Ted Marsden and his team were posthumously awarded the George Medal. This medal was the highest honor given to civilians and soldiers who displayed extraordinary courage. The medals were ceremonially presented to family representatives. At the ceremony, the Defense Secretary of the time spoke. Ted Marsden and his team were the invisible heroes of Dunkirk. They never fired a weapon. They never charged at the enemy with bayonets. But what they did may have saved thousands of lives. Without communication, there is no coordination. Without coordination, there is no evacuation. They were the foundation stones of that evacuation. And at the most difficult moment, in the darkest hour, they chose death rather than abandon their duty. This is the purest definition of heroism in military history. We will never forget them. Today, a small memorial stands on the Dunkirk beach. 5 names are inscribed on it: Sergeant Edward Ted Marsden, Corporal William Billy Crawford, Private James Thornton, Private Patrick O'Brien, and Private Georgie Evans. Beneath the memorial is a quote from Ted's final note: "We did our duty. We did it until the very end. We died as British soldiers." Every year, in the first week of June,
British veterans and families visit this memorial. They leave flowers, say prayers, and pass the story on to the next generation. American military history associations have also added the story to their curricula, because this story is a symbol not only of British heroism, but of the entire Allied spirit, the story of people who fought for freedom and, if necessary, died for it. And now, I'm speaking to you who are watching this video. The story of Ted Marsden and his team took place 85 years ago, but their courage, loyalty, and sacrifice are timeless. If we can sit in our comfortable chairs today, speak freely, and go wherever we want, it's because of heroes like them. They died for us, and our duty is to never forget them. If this story moved you, please share it with others. Tell your family members. Talk about it with your friends, because history lives as long as it's told. It gains meaning as long as it's not forgotten. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support enables us to continue telling stories like this. And finally, I want to share a secret. Not all of the documents recovered from Ted Marsden's well have been published. Some documents are still kept classified due to the sensitive information they contain. What do these documents say? What other secrets did Ted leave behind? Historians are still researching, and perhaps one day these secrets too will come to light. In our next video, I'll tell you about another forgotten hero of World War II. This time, the story comes from the Pacific Front, an incredible survival struggle of American sailors. If you're curious, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is just as striking as Ted Marsden's. See you soon. And remember, heroes don't die, they just change the watch. Let's meet in the next video.